video is for people who find comfort in realizing that the past was just as messed up as the present. Hello my lovely friends, it's Margaret. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming at you with some recommendations for historical fiction. Most of y'all probably already know the drill. This is my 5th recommendation in a series of recommendations videos for my Fableland TBR game. You do not have to be playing Fableland to find some good books in this recommendation, but if you are interested in the TBR game, links in the description box. Check those out. I will also have timestamps down in the description along with links to the previous videos that I have done in this series. So far I have done fantasy, science fiction, mystery, and contemporary. So if you're looking for recommendations in any of those, go ahead and check those videos out. And let's get into some historical fiction that I have enjoyed and like to force on other people. The first one that I have to talk about is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is set in World War II Germany, and it follows, what is her name? Liesel. It follows Liesel. So she ends up with this older German couple. Her parents, her mother, I believe, I think her mom sent her to kind of be protected there because her family, her parents at least, were communists and they were dealing with the fact that the Nazis didn't like that. So this follows her as she kind of gets this obsession with stealing books and reading and all of that kind of stuff. It is a very, very like, it is a journey. It is going to hurt your heart. You will break down, probably crying during this book. That's what I have been told by people who are normal humans and not me. We're looking at it, we basically are looking at it from the people that were doing what they could to oppose Hitler and what Hitler was doing with the Holocaust and all of that, but also were trying to survive themselves. And it's a very good book. I really enjoyed it. Made my brother cry, so check it out. The next book that I have comes with like multiple trigger warnings for sexual assault, for violence against women, I believe death of children as well. It's been a while since I read it, but just know it is a tough book, but it is also one of the best books I have ever read, and that is 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. This is about 2 different women living in Afghanistan. We follow both of them, I think, from their childhood to the point where they end up married to their husband. It definitely brings a human aspect to the last several decades of events that have happened in the Middle East. It really makes you sit down and confront the actions of other nations in the global north and how they have just been basically screwing things up in the Middle East for years and years and decades, like probably centuries, honestly, considering colonialism. It really just digs into the lives of these women and how the wars affected them, and also how that affected society and the way society saw and treated them. It's not sitting there going, oh, this was some idyllic place before we started screwing things up, but it does kind of show the push and pull relationship that came with what I guess you'd say Western interference and how that changed the dynamics that were starting to show up. It's a hard book. It is going to make you have to sit and think of things and sit with your feelings and just like really question a lot of things. But it also is wonderful. And one of the just like, somehow in the midst of all the terrible things that happen in this book, there still is hope. And the fact that the author kind of was able to give that to the audience and to the people that read this book just speaks of a hope that he still has for everything that's going on. Please read this, especially if you grew up in like the United States, Canada, over in the UK, that kind of thing. Read it. The next one that I want to recommend is a little bit lighter. It is My Lady Jane by, let's see if I can remember this, Cynthia Hand, Jody Meadows, Brody Ashton. I think that's their names. This is a very like farcical take on Tudor history. It specifically focuses on Lady Jane Grey, which if you know anything about English history, she was what was known as the 9 Days Queen. She was queen for 9 days between Edward VI and Mary the Tudor, Mary the First, and then she was beheaded because people put her in a place that she didn't want to be, and unfortunately it meant that Mary's life was in danger, and Mary didn't want to deal with that. So, like, the woman barely, like, didn't kill her own sister. So, like, her cousin, zero chance for her cousin. We are in a completely different world. People have the ability to turn into animals. They kind of are trying to replicate the Protestant versus Catholic kind of stuff that was going on in the Tudor era, and especially when we were going from Edward to Mary to Elizabeth. They were kind of trying to replicate that without actually going into Tudor versus Catholic. It's a completely different thing. I don't remember what they call it, but people can turn into animals, and so that's part of what's going on here. It's basically, they said, what if history had a happy ending, and they completely changed everything. It is so tongue-in-cheek. It is so good at making fun of, and this may just be because I am a Tudor nerd, so I know a lot of the stuff they're making fun of, but it does such a good job of making fun of Tudor history, like some of the Tudor social things, and like the way that just does such a good job of like just being funny about that. And like, it's one of those, like, if you don't like books that address the audience and like bring the audience in on the joke, or acknowledge that the audience is in on the joke, you're not gonna like this. But I highly enjoyed it, and I didn't mind that, like, they completely changed history. I just really appreciated, like, even though they changed, like, literally everything. And it's funny because they really do like Elizabeth more than Mary, but, like, Elizabeth was also terrible, just so everyone knows. Like, Mary was a special kind of, like, terrible, because she was definitely, like, just probably most likely very mentally ill. Like, yeah. So that definitely did not help. But then Elizabeth was perfectly sane, supposedly, and did some of the same terrible stuff, just at different people. Sorry, that is a Tudor rant. I apologize. The point is, they really messed with the history. And I don't mind that, because I liked what they were doing, because they went into it from the get-go, letting you know that this was a satire. It's a farce. It's not going to be the history you know. They go, this is what really happened. We're changing up the narrative. We're changing up the story. We are going to do something different than what y'all are used to. So, and I really appreciated that, and because it's like a really like a historical fantasy, like like in the way that we're fantasizing about history. It works for me. All right, the next one, it also takes place in England a couple hundred years later, I think. Yeah, because 15, 16, okay, yeah, I just had to double check my centuries there. Instead of taking place in England in the late 1500s, we now have one taking place in the early 1800s. This is To Have To Hoax by Martha Waters. It's a really cute historical romance. This is about two people. I don't remember their names. I just remember that, so they end up getting caught in a compromising position, and by compromising, they mean, like, people mean they were on the same balcony at the same time at a ball, and so then they kind of have to get married very quickly. It is, like, they do like each other at the beginning, like in that first little prologue bit, they do like each other, and then something happens, and they have a falling out, and so we pick up 5 years later, 5 years from the beginning of the prologue, where he has had an accident, didn't think to let his wife know, and she's mad about it, because even though they're not really talking, like, she's still his wife, she still feels like she needs, like, her future is very much, like, affected by this. And so she decides that she is going to fake an illness to let him know how it feels. And it just becomes this escalating competition between the two of them to see who can outperform the other in how they are reacting to this illness that she is pretending she has. Obviously, it's a romance. They're going to fall back in love again. And it's really interesting because I actually liked the thing that broke them up very much was something that, when you think about the time period and when you think about, not broke them up, but like the schism between them, very much when you think about the time period and what was going on, you can very much see how this would be something that would split them up, and also something that, like, even though all it needed was like a real conversation, you can see the pride of the two people is what is keeping them from being able to actually, like, talk with the other person and clear things up. And, like, it just, like, it's one of those, like, you can just sit down and have a conversation, and yet the entire time you're like, I understand why these two idiots are not having a conversation. I really enjoyed it. I had fun. I'm excited to read the second book, and yes, it's very good. So the next one I want to talk about is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is about two sisters, and they are from a small town that is primarily very light-skinned black people. So this is about two sisters. They are twins, and they are light-skinned enough that they can pass as white. And so the two sisters kind of pick up, leave town. They start their own lives in, I think it's New Orleans. There's nothing on the back of there because this is a book of the month. I think it is New Orleans. Basically, it's about the two of them. One of them decides that she is going to pass for white, and the other one decides that she is lives as a black woman. And then this follows them through like several decades, following them and how that impacts how they lived, what their lives were like, what their choices were, and also the implications that had on their future. Like, I already said that, but like it's more than just like life trajectory, because like it's complicated. It is very complicated, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it shows the different emotional impacts that their two different lives have on them and on their families. This was just so well written. It was one of those things where even though you don't always agree with choices that certain characters make, you really understand why. You see them as a human being who is just trying to do the best they can to have the life they want. This is good. This is a very good book, and I think it is also a very eye-opening book, and it's going to make you think of things, because this isn't your traditional, like, I think, narrative that you would see most people picking up when it comes to, like, this really delves into the more subtle ways racism affects people and follows people through their lives. After that, we have to talk about one that I feel is like a very underrated book, because I don't know that I've ever heard anyone talk about this book before, and that is Lazaretto by Diane McKinney Whetstone. This is set like directly after Lincoln, like the night of Lincoln's assassination, and then follows a black woman and various people in her life throughout like the next couple of decades. It's really kind of breaking down the idea that the North was so much more, advanced when it comes to attitudes about race and things like that. I think that really it's if you thought that, this is a wake-up call. It is also about family. It is about community. It is the ending. Like, it is a heavy, hard book. There is a lot of trigger warnings for racism. There are trigger warnings for sexual abuse, but it is also so worth the read because of the journey you're taking on and where that brings you emotionally at the end, the way things come together, all of the pieces fitting, and it is so good. It made my top books of 2019 or whatever year I read this, it was in my top books, because it is just that much of an emotional journey. And like, I can't say I loved every minute, but just the ending makes every single minute of it worth it. It's a type of ending that I really, really enjoy. Like, it just, like, you can have the saddest book, and if you end it this way, I will think it is the best book I have ever read. This is also very well written, and I just adore it. The next one I want to recommend is less a specific book by the author and more the author herself, and that is June Her. She's written The Silence of Bones and also The Forest of Stolen Girls. This one I mentioned in my mystery thriller recommendation video, but these are both historical mysteries set in Korea. This one is set in 1426, yep, and this one is set in 1800. Dang, I was way off when I was trying to guess what area. These are so good. I love the way that June Her chooses to highlight women's lives and really like show the options that women had as far as supporting themselves went in these historical settings in Korea. I like this one better than I liked this one, but they are both so well done when it comes to creating an atmosphere and a setting and a mystery that's going to have you kind of following along with the characters trying to piece things together. And I highly recommend anything that this woman has written, because she does such a good job of creating character, creating her world, setting the scene, making you guess, making you frustrated, making you sad, doing really complex and tricky family dynamics, and just like all of that. This one's really good if you like bittersweet ending books. This one I found more emotionally satisfying for myself, just because of certain elements. I think this one we definitely get more of the family aspect in this, versus in this one it is more about a girl trying to find her family, and we don't get as much of her interacting with the people she's trying to find. Another one I want to talk about, if you're looking for something a little bit more paranormal, a little bit less like in this world, but like a little bit outside of like what would be normal, I want to mention The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is about a girl named Evie, and she has powers where like if she touches something, she can see things about the person who owned that object. Like she can see their secrets or something. I can't entirely remember, but she ends up getting shipped off to New York City to live with her uncle, because she does this kind of as a party trick, and it really upsets some people where she is from, and her family's like a higher society family, and so those are like, well, you're a problem, let's ship you off to New York. And so it follows her and a few other characters that are similar to her in that they each have different powers. I love this. I love the dynamics of the different characters. It does take a while for everyone to meet. We do take 2 books for everything to come together, but just the way Libba Bray does characters, the way she brings these plots together, they are all kind of paranormal mysteries. This first one is a murder mystery that starts out when Evie touches the shoe of a dead woman, and that kind of leads her into like this, I don't even remember what it was, like this ghost type haunting that's going on. And so they're trying to solve that before he takes any more lives, and it's very reminiscent of like Jack the Ripper vibes if you're interested in like those kinds of things. But I loved Evie as a main character. I love the other main characters that we have in this series, and I love the dynamics of these characters as we go further in the series. Libba Bray does such a good job of bringing new characters in to the books and developing them in such a way that the audience cares about them from the get-go. Or at least by the end of the book, like you're attached to that character as well. I also think that Libba Bray does a very good job of not shying, while still kind of maybe highlighting some of the glitzier parts of the 20s, because this happens in the 1920s, but she also doesn't shy away from the like failings of society in these periods. The last book, maybe not as good, but like the first couple of books, she really did her research. She really was drawing some parallels between like what happened in history and what is happening now. And she also really was like, listen, the 1920s are not this fun, idyllic thing that you guys think for everyone. And I think she does a really good job of tackling that, especially in the first 2 books, in a way that acknowledges it, but doesn't make it the central issue that she's trying. Like, she's not trying to write about someone else's experience necessarily. She's just trying to make sure that, like, she acknowledges it. The final one is also paranormal fantasy, but I can't not talk about historical settings without talking about Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. This is my favorite so far Cassandra Clare series. I know she also has the Last Hour series, which happens in a historical setting, and if you like this one, I definitely suggest you check that one out because it's a direct sequel. But like, you need to start with this one because Will, Tessa, and Jim are just, I love them so much. This one particularly is about Tessa, and she comes from the United States over to England because her brother had previously gone over there because they had family connections and they were going to get him a job so he'd be able to support her. Her aunt has recently died, and so she's kind of on her own. She's like, I gotta go find my brother, he's been missing. And then when she gets there, she ends up getting kidnapped by 2 warlocks, and they discover a specific like magical talent that she didn't know she had. That literally all is just to get her in a situation to where she has to get rescued by the Shadowhunters, and she's drawn into that world because nobody knows quite why she's able to do what she's able to do, but like, she's definitely not a Shadowhunter, she's definitely not this, she's definitely not like a vampire or where, like all of that. Like, they're like, what are you? If you are looking for like something that's really angsty, really like leans into that Victorian aesthetic, really is involved in a lot of the writers and kind of the tropes of a lot of the most popular novels of the time, this is going to be just a fun ride for you. This is also very like fantasy, paranormal, like what's happening behind the scenes type fiction, and I've read it so many times at this point, and I love it so much. Like, this is, can you see all of those tabs? I love it so much, and I have revisited it so many times, and I will probably revisit it again in my life. Number one, because Will Herondale was exactly the kind of boy that teenage Margaret was looking for, and still is in the sequel series. I want to point out, but like, especially here, that is, yep. So those are my recommendations if you are looking for some historical fiction to read. I am always looking for more historical fiction. I do prefer the stuff that at least has kind of a sort of hopeful, happy ending. I like families being reunited. I like, you know, the bad guy getting stomped on. I like those kinds of things. So if you have anything that's like it doesn't have to be like feel good the entire time, but like has a feel good ending in historical fiction, I would love to see your recommendations in my comments. If you are not feeling chatty but you still want to let me know that you watched to the end of the video, go ahead and leave me the open book emoji, since we are talking about history and historical things. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I will have a couple of my other recommendations videos over here for you to check out as well. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!